What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and today I will be giving the first instalment in my history of comic book films, and this will be showing just how the genre developed in 1939 right through to 1960. Now these are early stages when comic book films were not really considered comic book films and they would look very different from what we see today. So without further ado, let's get into it. So immediately after superheroes came to prominence in comic books, it began the golden age of comic books. Now, I'm not really going to be talking about the golden age of comic books. However, it is important to understand that back then, a lot of the comic books being developed were a lot darker. They were a lot more grounded. A lot of the early comic books, especially Batman, were a lot darker. So filmmakers began to develop adaptations on the screens. Now, these were often Saturday film serials, so they weren't really released in cinemas. I think a couple were. However, you would see, for example, part 1 on Saturday, and then the following Saturday you would see part 2, and the following Saturday you would see part 3. So they're often serials told in multiple episodes. Now, the first one to be released was Madrak the Magician way back in 1939. Now, while Madrak the Magician weren't really a popular comic book character, the movie was. It was actually quite a success. So they began to develop adaptations for actual popular comic book characters. They had the adventures of Captain Marvel, they had Batman, they had the Phantom, they had Captain America, and of course they had Superman as well. Now, all of these adaptations for the Saturday film series were massive successes. They made a lot of money and a lot of critics and comic book fans praised them. And this was kind of what many considered, due to the golden age of comic books being so high at this point, the film adaptations, there was just endless possibilities. They didn't have a lot to go on because, of course, comic books with superheroes had not been around a lot, so they were kind of developing the ideas as they went along. However, some of these early series, and I have seen some of these, yeah, they are very different. There isn't really a villain as such. They're mostly just unnamed, thugs or gangsters which the superheroes are fighting against. And of course, the effects are not really that special in a modern sense. However, back then they were groundbreaking. And some of these early comic book serials, you know what, they can be fun to watch. Now, of course, no one understood the potential of comic book films at this stage. And a lot of kids would often watch these Saturday serials. A lot of the adults would kind of say, oh, well, they're not really for us. However, I'm pretty sure that a few adults would have watched these. And yeah, back then it was very different. I don't think the Saturday serials were considered worthy of, a full-blown film adaptation, because obviously, even though it was the golden age of comic books, no one understood the potential of superheroes on film yet. And that is something that would plague comic book movies throughout the continuing decades, as no one would really understand their full potential during this early period. In the following decades, the Saturday film serials went into decline because people weren't really watching them anymore. There was more variety. So a lot of the comic book films, because they were made with Saturday serials, they began to decline and people just didn't really seem interested in making them anymore. There was turmoil in the comic book industry at this point. The golden age of comic books was coming to an end. The silver age of comic books were beginning, because a lot of do-gooders stated that there was too much violence and too many dark themes in comic books. So they started to make them more comedic, it was more cheesy, and it was not supposed to be taken seriously anymore. And that affected the film adaptations of comic books, because by 1960, the only adaptations you could see were all cheesy. And I'll discuss that in the next episode. So thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope that you enjoyed this installment of my history of comic book films. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. And I will see you in the other one. See ya.